they saw that kind of a life as exciting in a way, so that attracted them as well. So
there's a lot of things that were pretty shocking in the book. I want to go back to the laundry business. What is this about the laundry business that was such a big to-do?
Well, in Detroit especially, they called the Cleaners and Dryers War. Jews were involved. Jews were involved in a lot of things. I mean, legitimate things. And then how do you get competition? You have competition. Now, how do you eliminate competition? Well, what happens is both sides invited, quote-unquote, thugs, muscle men, to blow up the opposition's store or shop. And so one blew up, and then the other guy had someone blow up his business. So you had that happening. You had it in New York, where the employers hired mobsters against the strike breakers. So the unions, the Jewish unions then, hired Jewish gangsters and others to fight against the gangsters that the employers were hired. So the Jewish community said, oh my God, what is going on here? Jews are fighting Jews, and there's gangsters, and both sides are hiring. In other words, the methods used by one side started to be used by the other side. So they got involved in these wars where they blew up each other's businesses. And there was an expression they used to use if they blow up a business or have burn down the business to collect the insurance. And they used to call it Jewish lightning, because it became a way for Jews when the neighborhood changed. If they had a restaurant there or something, and Jews stopped coming because the neighborhood maybe turned black or whatever it was, and they were afraid to go to the restaurant. So the man was losing business and not making any money. So he had insurance. He'd have someone torch the business, and then he'd collect the insurance and then open a restaurant in the Jewish area or something like that. Well, this happened a lot in different places, and so he got the nickname. Oh yeah, he had a fire in his place. It was caused by Jewish lightning. And so you had that. So that's what it was, especially in Detroit, the Cleaners and Dryers War, because both sides were hiring thugs and mobsters to blow up the opposition. One way of eliminating the competition is to kill the competition.
The other way is to buy it.
Let's be honest. That's you eliminate the guy, the man, or the business, and that's it. It's the field is yours. And so it went on until finally, the police. Generally, the police many times stayed out of it. They talk about the Capone gang in Chicago, that there were, during his era, there were 1,700 murders, gangland murders, and how many were solved? 13. Because the police had looked at killing each other. Bugsy Siegel said it. Ben Siegel said it. He said, we only kill each other,
Right, I wrote that down, actually.
Yeah,
I wrote that down.
And his slogan was, live fast, die young, and have a good-looking corpse. Well, he lived fast, he died young, but he didn't look that good. He had a bullet that knocked one of his eyes out and all this kind of stuff. So, it just, but it's fascinating in the sense of it's another part of the Jewish experience. I don't glorify it. I don't think that that's the only thing. There were all these other things. If you look at the history of the Jews in the United States, you know that, and the music and medicine and Nobel Prize winners. Since World War II, over 40% of all the Nobel Prize winners in science and medicine, economics rather, in science have been Jewish. And the Jews make up less than 2% of the American population today. So there is a certain kind of Jewish genius or ability or motivation but this is part of it, and although it doesn't exist, there are still Jewish criminals, we know, but it's not like it was. They don't control crime in the cities the way they did during Prohibition. They were prominent. They were the most prominent element for a period of time, more so than the Italians. But then they got out of it. It didn't continue, where with the Italians it did continue, as we know. And then you have others that are involved in especially the drug business and stuff like that.
What is your take on the percentage of effectiveness now of the Italian mafia?
It's not as effective as it used to be. I'm not into it, really, to be honest. I'm not a criminologist, and I really don't deal with that. All I do is I read about things like that. But there are so many other groups, ethnic groups involved, whether they be Colombians or Mexicans or whatever, who are involved in the drug business and other things. It's very difficult for the Italians to exercise the kind of control that they did, 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
You think it's because of globalization? It's
globalized, and also you have all kinds of ethnic groups that use crime as a way of, also moving up the ladder. So it's a different situation than it was. They're competing with others. I mean, there's industries that they may control, and we still read about periodically people are killed here and there and others, but all kinds of other people are, other ethnic groups or elements are involved in it as well. So it's not the dominance that it used to be. I'll give you a fast example. Up until 1939, Jews were very heavily involved in the drug traffic, bringing drugs to the United States and controlling the distribution. Now, their sources were Hong Kong, and they had connections in Europe. Well, what happened in 1939? World War II broke out, September 1st, 1939. The Japanese gained control in east of Hong Kong. The Germans start wiping out Jews. They killed good Jews, and they also killed the bad Jews in Europe. So the connection in Europe is cut. The connection with Hong Kong is cut. Now, who is the ally of Germany in 1939? World War II breaks out? Italy. So the Italians then had the field to themselves. And so the Jews were no longer heavily involved in that because those in Europe were killed. Hong Kong was no longer in British possession and stuff. It was occupied by the Japanese, who were allied to the Germans, who were allied to the Italians. And so the Jewish connection in the international drug dealing business was pretty much cut, and it became dominated by the Italians, and it continued that way because they, for a while, and then other ethnic groups got involved in it, and drugs were brought from other places, from Latin America and this and that. You know what's going on in Mexico today, for God's sakes. The drug cartels are killing each other. They're running cities and countries, and the murder rate is just astronomical there. The government can't even control it anymore. So you have all these different elements. But the Jews were involved, but the war took care of that. Also, the war took care of Jewish involvement in international prostitution, because they killed all these, the Germans were killing all the Jews, the nice Jews, the great Jews, the brilliant Jews, and the criminal Jews. They just killed a Jew as a Jew. They didn't care. They're killing them all, whether they're young or old or whatever. So that pretty much cut the tie to Europe and eliminated practically, for all intents and purposes, European Jewry. It was gone. You kill 6 million of the 8.5 million who lived in Eastern Europe, and the rest that some of them, they leave, they come to the States, Latin America, wherever they could go after the war, Israel or whatever, and you have small numbers, living in Austria, living in Germany, living in Hungary. I mean, it's not what it was. 600,000 Jews in 1935 in Hungary, down to about 50,000 now of whatever was left. So things do change. The world goes on. The situation is different, and criminal activity on the part of Jews is certainly different. So times have changed. That doesn't mean Jews are not involved. There are Israelis who are involved in things in Europe and in the United States, and there's Russian Jews who are involved in things and stuff. But it's not the dominance that existed during Prohibition in the United States in terms of literally controlling, the crime in various cities in the United States. That doesn't exist anymore by one ethnic group.
Now, is it true that in 1886, in the beginning, Jews occupied 10% of the New York population?
In certain areas, yes, yeah. And actually, later on, the 25% of New York's population was Jewish at some point. And then actually 40% of the Jews in the United States in 1940 lived in New York City. So they were, Jews were they still are a big presence. They don't have that. I don't know if they make up 20% in New York. Yeah, they probably do. They still do. There's over 1 million in New York City. So I don't, follow the numbers anymore. But there's a demographic problem in the Jewish community in the U.S. I mean, they're just not having babies. They're having less than 2 children per family, so the numbers are going down. So, but yes, was there a question that you wanted to?
Yeah. When you looked at those figures, what percentage were involved in the mob? Was it 4%?
Oh, it was way back when in the 19th century, very small numbers. It was a different community. It was a much different community in smaller numbers. And so it was totally different. There were Jewish criminals here and there, pickpockets and con men. Once in a while there'd be a Jewish guy involved in a killing, but basically it was pickpockets and confidence men and fences, getting stolen goods and things like that.
What's a confidence man?
comes over and says, "Listen, I found a wallet, and can you hang on to it for me? I'll be back." And it's got, it's got $200, and he pulls out a few bills in it or something like that. And he says, "Hang on to it. I'm just going to go away and go to the bank and something. I'll come back and I'll take it from you, but you can use it as surety." And the guy says, "Sure." So he says, "But I just met you. I don't know you. Give me $50 and you hang on to the wall. I'm just throwing this out, and hold on